Glenn. I really appreciate you coming on the show with us here at the Leak Project. I know very little about what you do and what you talk about. So if you could just give our listeners a brief introduction about yourself and why you decided to go kind of renegade, I guess you could say, because most people are still in this 9-to-5 matrix, and you seem to really set yourself apart from that.
Well, actually, see, I've been working on airplanes since 1976.
Okay.
So I've been working in aviation for over 40 years. Anyways, what happened was this guy came up to me back in the early 80s. No, it was actually in the late 80s, early 90s. When this guy came up to me, I was on a contract. I do aerospace engineering contracting. I started out as a mechanic, and now, you know, I work mostly engineering. Matter of fact, all engineering. But in the 80s, it was at the point where I was doing contracts. Sometimes it was as a mechanic, and sometimes it was in engineering. Sometimes it was quality, doing inspection work, that kind of thing. Anyways, so this guy comes up to me, and he starts talking about the two classes of citizens. And I told him, "You're nuts. You don't know what you're talking about." And he brought out some court cases. And I thought, when I read these court cases, I thought, you know what, this is true. This is the most fantastic thing there is. And so I basically had to investigate it. And the more I investigated it, the more I found out he's 100% correct. And so, you know, I'm just consider myself someone who is looking for the truth, someone who loves freedom, and someone who believes that, quite frankly, I believe our Constitution was inspired. And so, you know, if we go and do things that negate our Constitution for us, and we get into contracts essentially where all of a sudden now all those rights that people bled and died for, all those rights, we give them up voluntarily. Okay, it's a contract. And you know, I that's an insult to God. If the Constitution's inspired by God, and people bled and died to make sure that you had certain rights, and then you just go ahead and just give them up, then that's like slapping God in the face, in my opinion, and I can't do that.
And then, so you say the Constitution you feel was divinely inspired, and there's a whole bunch of information about our founding fathers on both sides of the coin. You know, I mean, and one thing about the internet is you definitely have to use discernment, because it's like a bathroom wall. You can post anything about anyone at any time. So you really have to get to the source. And I think that it's interesting when you look at kind of some of just the Federal Reserve as a whole. I mean, it seems to be something that doesn't really need to be there, but it is for our monetary system. And it seems like any of the, you know, people that are high up in the echelon that talk out or against the system like that, they seem to disappear.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve is, first of all, you know, I've been to the Supreme Court 4 times. I'm currently in the Supreme Court. I'm a bit of a student of the law. In other words, you know, I mean, part of, you know, learning this stuff is I started reading court cases, and then a friend of mine, you know, showed me how to file lawsuits, and so then I started doing that, and then I got assaulted by, you know, border pigs, for lack of a better word, and so you know, what happens is when you start learning about this stuff, you start becoming sensitive to when your rights are getting violated. You realize that your rights are being violated, and it's just like happening all over the place, and it kind of makes you mad. And so part of, you know, what I do is in an effort to educate these, you know, Mark Passio. You heard of Mark Passio?
Yes.
The guy's brilliant. He's a former Satanist priest, and he's got some real good YouTube videos about order followers and about natural law, and he goes through the words, because in the law words are everything, and so Mark Passio, you know, talks about these order followers, and so, you know, all of the atrocities in history were committed by order followers, people that, you know, were given orders, and just went ahead and did what they were told, even though it was an unlawful order. There's all sorts of examples, like the Nazis in the war crimes trials after the Second World War. They all claimed that they were justified in doing what they did because they were just following orders, quote unquote, just following orders. Well, they all suffered death by hanging, or almost all of them, and some of them are still hunted to this day. So just following orders is not a good excuse. That's what my point is, and that's another thing that I try and do, is educate these people to bring the truth to them. I mean, that's what the scriptures say we're supposed to do anyways, if you think about it. I consider myself Christian, and the scriptures say that we're supposed to, be bold and bring the truth to these people, and if they don't want to accept it, then they're going to be held accountable.
Now, how far back does this go? I mean, was this something that when the dollar became just complete fiat, not backed by gold anymore? Or, I mean, where would you say the starting point was when things just turned completely upside down?
Well, actually, I think it's the Civil War. What happened in the Civil War is that the southern states walked out of Congress. And at that point, the Republican Congress ceased to exist. And after that, everything's been under executive authority under martial law. Now, what's under our martial law is actually only D.C. and the territories. But under martial law, there's some really good books about that explain, there's a book called The Non-Ratification of the 14th Amendment by this Judge A.H. Ellett in the Utah Supreme Court that goes through and explains how this martial law works and how, you can wind up in what they view to be a contract and give up your rights, turn yourself into property. And I've got a letter, and I'll send you the letter if you're interested in it. I've got a letter from an Arizona senator that says, this was in 1985, and he says he sends it to every law enforcement agency in Arizona, and he says that you're going to run into people that have rescinded all of their contracts with the state and federal government, and as a result have become freemen under the organic constitution of the Republic of the United States of America, and I want to know about every instance of confrontation between law enforcement personnel and these people. And I've got a copy of the letter. I'll send it to you if you want it.
Absolutely. That'd be something we could show our listeners.
Okay. Well, I'll upload it right now.
Okay. Yeah, and another thing, too, that I just wanted to bring up, because this is something straight from Wikipedia, and I do know that if you have a certain article on there, you can actually edit it out oftentimes, so kind of take this with a grain of salt. But let me just read this real quick. If you type in sovereign citizen movement in a search engine, this is what comes up on Wikipedia. The sovereign citizen movement is a loose grouping of American and Canadian litigants, commentators, tax protesters, and financial scheme promoters. Self-described sovereign citizens take the position that they are answerable only by their particular interpretation of the common law and are not subject to any statutes or proceedings at the federal, state, or municipal levels, that they do not recognize United States currency and or they are free of any legal constraints. They especially reject most forms of taxation as illegitimate. And I just want to read one more paragraph, and I'm going to turn this back over to you, and this is at the bottom here. The Federal Bureau of Investigation classifies some sovereign citizens as extremists, as domestic terrorists. In 2010, the Southern Poverty Law Center estimated that approximately 100,000 Americans were hardcore sovereign believers, with another 200,000 just starting out by testing techniques of resisting everything from speeding tickets to drug charges. According to a 2014 report by the National Consortium for the Study of Terrorism and Response to Terrorism, START, a survey of law enforcement officials and agencies across the U.S. concluded that the movement was the single greatest threat to their communities, ranking above Islamic terrorists and jihadists. Sovereign citizens has also been identified as potential terrorist threats by the New South Wales Police Force in Australia. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, technically, there's no such thing as a sovereign citizen. Okay, technically, a citizen is a fictitious entity. But other than that, let me read you some court cases. I'll see if I can find you some court cases here to read to you, and then you can come to your own conclusion. What the courts are saying, and so what I am saying is that that's all hype and innuendo, quite frankly. I'm not saying it's not true. A lot of it is true, quite frankly. But no true sovereign ever goes and attacks the police. Okay, I mean, you don't have the right to be doing that kind of stuff. If they get attacked, they have the right to defend themselves. There's no doubt about it. Everybody has that right. They have no more rights than anybody else, if you think about it. But most of the people are asleep on their rights, and so most people don't have any clue about what their rights are. And that's part of what I try to do, is to educate people about who they are. Do you know who you are? I've got a whole set of YouTube videos that go through. It's a playlist, and it's do you know who you are? And most people don't have a clue about it, and that's why there's actually two classes of citizens, and that's what I was telling you at the very beginning. Is if you're a state citizen, and you can be a state citizen without being a U.S. citizen. There's all sorts of court cases to talk about it. If you're a state citizen, then you have all the rights of the king, okay? And I can show you court cases all day long that talk about that. But if you're a U.S. citizen, you are a slave. You are a piece of property. They can do literally anything they want, and they do it all the time. And you have no rights. Matter of fact, the courts have said that U.S. citizens don't have access to the first 8 amendments to the Constitution against the powers of the federal government. And so, again, do you know who you are? And so many of these people that call them sovereign citizens, they're in the process of learning. There's no doubt about it. But the question is you got to start somewhere, okay? And you cannot certainly can't attack them. There are public servants. But you have to let them know in no uncertain terms that that's what you expect them to be there for, is to serve you, and that you know your rights and that you intend to assert them. And I was visited by the FBI and the Texas State Police, and they told me that I'm listed as sovereign. So, and they told me I didn't tell them that I was, I didn't ask for that. They told me that I'm listed that way in their computer system. And what are you going to do? Anyways, let me see if I can find you these court cases that I'm just trying to think of where I have them.
And the reason I brought that up is I must wonder, certainly stuff like that, if somebody is sovereign or they've gone to bat against the system like that, then they probably think that they've got a mark on their heads, basically. And then you've got these NDAA bills that get passed that are so totalitarian and draconian. Do you ever wonder if you're walking down the street one of these days, there's going to be a black Suburban that's just going to pull up, bang, put a hood over your head, throw you in, you're gone?
Well, they all have their rules they have to follow. Okay, I doubt that would happen, quite frankly. If it did, whatever. What am I going to do? It's a dictatorship. If they're going to assault me, matter of fact, in my recent case to the Supreme Court, and I haven't, I think the answer is coming to me, but every time I've been to the Supreme Court, I've told them in their rules, okay, it says that they can turn away any case they want, and in their rules says you got to pay this filing fee. I tell them, you have no right to charge me a filing fee because I'm one of the people, and you have no right to turn this case away. And every time they accept the case. And in this case, in the petition for certiorari, the first thing you do in the beginning of the petition is you have a list of questions you want them to answer. And so, the one of the questions I asked is there a recommended number of times I have to say I'm not one of your U.S. citizen slaves before you quit treating me like one of your U.S. citizen slaves? Because that's exactly what they do. And a U.S. citizen, I can show you court cases to say that a U.S. citizen is a fictitious entity. This is all corporate law. That's exactly what they're operating under, is corporate law, and a U.S. citizen's a fictitious entity. And so either you're a living soul or you're one of the pieces of property. And if you're a fictitious entity, then they can do anything they want. It's no different than killing a dog or a cat, and they do. And so my attitude is that they want to blow my brains out. Come on down, make my day. The sooner the better. I don't want to be here anyways. If I had to be a slave, do me a favor. Put me to an end to my misery, because there is no way that I am going to be somebody's slave. And that's just the bottom line. You know what I mean?
Freedom!
It's live free or die. That's my attitude. And if you watch, I just uploaded a video called U.S. Marshals Pigs, because again, PIG is an acronym. It stands for Persons in Government Who Intend to Perjure Their Oath. And again, it's because I did a FOIA request, and they got like 400 pages of documents on me, and a lot of it is stuff that I sent to them that where I said, I accept your oath of office and I intend to assert my rights, and you do not have the right to unlawfully arrest me, and I do have the right to resist an unlawful arrest. And they're calling that a threat. And so they've listed me as a threat. That's fine. Go ahead. They're traitors, and Judgment Day is coming, and that's what I tell them, is that in the Bible it says that when you give your testimony and they reject your testimony, shake the dust of the earth from off your feet against them, and then God will deal with them. And so that's what I do. That's all I can do. And their Judgment Day's coming. That's all I can say, is their Judgment Day's coming.
So let's get into who we actually are. And you talk about these different, you can either be a U.S. citizen or a state citizen or sovereign. And I like how you brought up there is no sovereign citizen, because that's kind of like an oxymoron. No, let's look at that for a moment. How would one become a sovereign versus a state citizen or a U.S. corporate citizen?
Well, what happens is, again, it comes down to ignorance of our parents, our own ignorance. When you're born, okay, they create a birth certificate, and that is the genesis of the fictitious entity. And so what happens is that's the beginning. But even then, you have to still do more things. Okay, in other words, you have to get a social security number. A social security number, I can show you court cases that say a social security number is a number for a Sestake trust. Okay, so it has nothing to do with me. And let me. I'm just doing something on my computer while we're talking here, so I may sound a little bit distracted.
Hey, no problem.
What happens is they get you into what they view to be contracts, and again, all of the contracts have to be knowing, willing, and intentional. But if you don't know the law, then you're going to get railroaded. And that's just all there is to it. And here's some court cases that you might find interesting. This is Twining versus New Jersey, U.S. Supreme Court. I can give you the site. I mean, it's in my U.S. Marshals Pigs video. So watch the video. It says, quote, "State citizens are the only ones living under free government whose rights are incapable of impairment by legislation or judicial decision," unquote. Here's another one. Favot versus Kingsbury, and that's a California appellate case. Quote, "State citizenship is a vested substantial property right, and the state has no power to divest or impair these rights," unquote. And Hurtado versus California, U.S. Supreme Court again. Quote, "The state cannot diminish the rights of the people," unquote. Okay, so I don't care. They want to call me names. I don't care. That's when they're doing that stuff. They're traitors. Okay, they perjured their oath. And if we had some lawful people in government, that they would suffer the consequences of their treason, because that's exactly what they're doing. Is they're engaging in treason. Okay. And so I'm not a U.S. citizen. I tell them in no uncertain terms that I'm not one of their low-life scumbag U.S. citizens. Here, you want to see what it says about? I can give you some court cases. First of all, under Title 5, United States Code, Section 552A, A13, it says that the term federal personnel means officers and employees of the government of the United States, members of the uniformed services, including members of the reserve components, individuals entitled to receive immediate or deferred retirement benefits under any retirement program of the government of the United States, including survivor benefits. Okay, so if you think about that, what they're saying is anybody with a Social Security number is federal personnel. Okay, and so as soon as you tell them, they ask you for a Social Security number, there's no law that anybody has to get a Social Security number, and there's no law that says that you have to disclose it to anybody. And there's court cases that say that it's a number for a Sesticate trust. So in my first case, I sued the IRS because they were stealing my compensation for labor. I was working for U.S. Airways at the time, and I took them to the Supreme Court. And when I got to the Supreme Court, I said, I swear under penalty of perjury that I do not have a Social Security number, and I've never had a Social Security number, and it's no problem because you don't have one. It's a number belonging to a trust. When you say you have one, then that's the contract. That's what gets you into their jurisdiction. And so it's all about jurisdiction. It's always all about jurisdiction, and it's about hearsay because a Social Security number is hearsay. It's an entry in a computer. Anything in a computer is hearsay. Who's to say that somebody didn't go and manipulate the records in the computers? And anything in a computer is a hearsay. Any copy is hearsay. A driver's license is hearsay. A date of birth is hearsay. Do you remember the day you were given born? I don't remember that day, and I can't possibly say what it is from firsthand knowledge. So that's hearsay. Your name is hearsay. Everything they want is hearsay. They want you to give evidence against yourself, and when you do, you just buy into the fraud because everything they do is a fraud. You just bought into it, and you cannot sit there and claim that it was fraud now. Don't get me going.
No, I mean, please continue. The platform is yours, and this is stuff that, now you say hearsay. What is the definition of hearsay then?
Well, hearsay is anything they don't have witnesses for.
Okay. Hearsay
is where where they have something that says that this is evidence, but it's not. They got to have witnesses. They can't go and charge you with anything without witnesses, and yet they do it all the time. And you go and people give evidence against themselves. Here's a U.S. Supreme Court case, and there's actually a bunch of them that talk about this. It says, a U.S. citizen is not entitled to an Article III court, but instead gets an Article I court with a plenary military dictatorship jurisdiction under Article I, Section 8, Clause 17, Constitution for the United States of America, as defined and reinstated in National Mutual Insurance Company of the District of Columbia versus Tidewater Transfer Company. And that's located, it's the U.S. Supreme Court, 337 U.S. 582, which further states that citizens of the District of Columbia are not embraced by the judicial power of Article 3 of the Constitution for the United States of America. The same statement is held in Hepburn versus Dundas, and there's a bunch of cases, Downs versus Bidwell. In 1804, the Supreme Court, through Chief Justice Marshall, held that a citizen of the District of Columbia is not a citizen of a state. And then here's this National Mutual Insurance Company of the District of Columbia versus Tidewater Transfer Company, U.S. Supreme Court, again, 1948, quote, "We therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of the states were not included in the catalog of controversies over which the Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia and through their plenary power." Okay? Plenary power is military dictatorship. Through their plenary power nationally covers those citizens, even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union, unquote. And so it doesn't matter where you live. If you're a U.S. citizen, you're going to get a military dictatorship. Okay, that's exactly what happens. That's the first thing they do when they stop you. They're trying to fabricate evidence, date of birth. They want to see the driver's license. That's evidence of U.S. citizen. If you don't give it to them, then they have nothing.
So you just don't comply.
Well, you don't give them evidence against yourself, and so then they want to know that kind of stuff. I tell them, well, that's hearsay. Why, I don't have to give hearsay evidence. So you building a case against me, I don't have to give you any evidence. And you see what I'm saying? That's where you go with it. You don't give them anything. And it's amazing how many times when you start bringing up the right issues, all of a sudden they don't want to talk to you anymore.
How many people that you talk to about this type of, about what's going on, do they just look at you and say, hey, I mean, you're crazy, or that's insane?
Actually, I've got my YouTube channel has 3,000 subscribers. I've got 2 private groups, one at Yahoo and one at Google, and between those 2, I have another 2,000 subscribers. I've got a YouTube, a group on Facebook that has 13,000 subscribers, and I have a Facebook community page that's got 5,000 subscribers, and so. Yeah, there are people out there that probably think it's crazy, but, that's their choice. If they want to be a slave, it's a perfectly free country. If you want to be a slave, you can be a slave. More power to you. I wish you all the best of luck with that. I'm afraid I can't do that. I can't. It's an insult to God. I can't do that.
Now, the 13,000 people that you're connected with on Facebook, do you guys kind of collaborate on information and gray scales of law, words to use, not to use, etc.?
Actually, the Facebook group, I don't do much with that. It's a lot of people putting a lot of stuff up there about issues today, because there's a lot more than just the issue of sovereignty. There's issues of, chemtrails. There's an issue with Fukushima. There's issues with all of the stuff, the New World Order, all of these gangsters that are trying to take over the world these days, and so there's a whole myriad of issues that people will talk about on my groups on Facebook. Now, on my Yahoo group and Google group, that's a lot more focused. I keep a more tight control on that stuff, but on my YouTube page, all they do is subscribe, and so they're notified when I upload a new video.
Now, how long have you been on YouTube?
I think I started doing that in 2011.
Okay. And then have you noticed over the past 5 years that a lot more people are starting to become aware of this?
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, I believe that I have been the one to bring up certain issues. I started out talking about Churchianity. Okay, Churchianity is a phrase that my brother gave me, and I thought, well, gee, that sounds pretty good. I think I'll use that. And Churchianity is 501c3 tax-exempt churches that claim they're Christian but are not. And because a 501c3 tax-exempt church cannot speak the truth. And so, therefore, if all they can speak is half-truths and lies, well, that's satanic. And so there's a lot of so-called Christian churches out there.
Can I jump in real quick?
Sorry?
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to jump in real quick because you said they can't speak the truth.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they can't say anything bad about the government. I don't know if you remember back in when George Bush Jr. first took power in 2001. There was a Southern Baptist temple in Indianapolis, Indiana that got shut down by the IRS. I don't know. Do you remember that on the news?
I don't remember the church that got shut down, although I do know after the Patriot Act, it became a lot more mainstream to have the, big time popes and priests and pastors and people at the top level of the congregation, bishops and stuff, saying, okay, you need to follow the orders of the government and just do what they say. It's okay. Because there's that part in the Bible that says you need to follow the government, and if you don't, that you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do, and I'm familiar with that. No, the actually started with Johnson. Johnson is the one that did it, and because he considered the churches to be political enemies, and so he went and made it so that they couldn't say anything bad about government. And that's carried on ever since. And there was in 2001, there was a Southern Baptist temple in Indianapolis, Indiana, that got the doors padlocked by the IRS because they were saying bad things about the government. And in fact, once you get that 501c3 tax-exempt status, if you read the IRS's own publications, in its publication 552, it says in there that all churches are automatically tax-exempt. But when they apply for that tax-exempt status, now they're not a church anymore. They're, quote-unquote, a tax-exempt organization, and they have to follow certain regulations. And so they're not a church anymore. Once they apply for that 501c3 tax-exempt status, they're not a church. They're not treated like a church, and they have to follow certain regulations, whereas any church, by definition, is tax-exempt and is not subject to regulation by the government because the Constitution says they're not. You see what I'm saying?
I do. I'm just trying to figure out if that was the case already, then why would they go that route and sign the 503? Like just because they're well, because if you're a religion and you're already tax exempt, do you have to sign that 503 thing, or is there another form? Or okay,
no, you don't. No, you're automatically tax exempt, and so they don't have to, but they volunteer in. Okay, a lot of it's coercion and intimidation, but they volunteer in, and that's that's because of maybe ignorance, but. Mark Passio calls it ignorance, okay? Because the information is out there. All you have to do is find it, and they're just ignoring it. I really like Mark Passio.
So he was a high Satanist priest, you said?
Yes, he was, yeah.
Okay, because here's the thing about Satanists, and I do know that some of them don't even believe in the devil or Satan. They're more humanists, and then you've got some that do worship Satan himself. So was he like one of the priests that was actually doing specific rituals and ceremonies, or because there's so many different forms of it, just like any other religion?
I don't know. He was involved with some Church of Satan in Philadelphia, and maybe you can find out on his YouTube channel, but I don't know. He has walked away from that, and his job or his seems like his lot in life is to try and educate people about freedom, and you'd have to watch his videos. He's got some great stuff, and it's very articulate and intelligent. And one of the things he says is that all of the atrocities in history were committed by order followers, and he's 100% right.
Now, I'm looking at your YouTube channel, Sovereign Living, and you've got just a bounty of different podcasts that reach on different topics. What have you noticed this year to be the biggest thing on people's minds with those that you reach out with? Would it be politics, Hillary Clinton? Well,
one of the things you have to do in order to register to vote is you have to swear under penalty of perjury a U.S. citizen. And so any true sovereign is not registered to vote. So all of that's a circus, And if you remember the court cases that I just read you here a few minutes ago, there's nothing they can do that affects we the people anyways. And so that's all a circus. And I basically ignore all that stuff. If I was to vote, I kind of like Trump, quite frankly. But again, that's all a circus. That's all corporate. That's all D.C. Okay, that's all for D.C. citizens. I can show you court cases that say that U.S. citizens don't have any political power except what the government gives them, and if you think about it, that's justification to basically rig the elections, and that's what they do.
I think they're all a bunch of actors up there anyway. I don't know if our vote has ever really mattered regardless who wins the presidency. So it's interesting, and oftentimes you see pictures of them hanging out behind the scenes, yet they're up and battling each other on the forefront with the microphones like a couple of wrestling characters with the WWE or something. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So
It's all a big charade.
it really is. The whole world's a stage, and it seems like we're in a time right now where a lot of information is accessible via the web. And with the information you bring out, it does seem so sensitive. And some of the other avenues out there, like Facebook especially, because all the censorship that they do, I'm surprised they let you do what you do.
Well, I've been to the Supreme Court 4 times, and there's been times when they wouldn't let me log into my account, and I told them, I basically said, "You want to be next?" And I'm very. I've had judges that commented me on my paperwork. I know how to put together a legal brief, and it's all stuff that I just learned. And so matter of fact, there's all of these judges, all of these courts. There are no Article 3 courts out there. You have to understand that. And they're all Article 1 courts. It's a kangaroo court. It's a military tribunal. It's prejudged from the beginning. And once you point all that stuff out and it's a fraud and you don't participate in the fraud, they don't want to talk to you anymore. It's amazing how that works. And, but I usually like to go on the attack and attack them. If there's something that's going down that I see someone's building a case against me or something like that, I'll attack them and drag their butt into court first. And that makes it even more so they don't want to talk to me. And, at the end of the day, as long as they're following their oaths, we have good government. And it just seems like it's getting worse and worse. I think, quite frankly, that we're living in the period of time talked about in the book of Revelations. I think all of that stuff is happening right now.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute then, because the book of Revelation it's incredible. And a couple of things that really stand out to me in that specific treatise is the New Jerusalem that descends from heaven. And it kind of, in my opinion, is described like this giant spaceship almost, but who knows what the thing is. I mean, it's obviously a lot of, I guess you could say, symbols and stuff. Who knows how literal to take it. But you look at the different seals that are released and the possibility of the third of the sky, the third of the stars falling from the sky, a third of the waters on earth turning to blood and stuff. Where do you think we're at right now in the book of Revelation then?
I'm not sure. I think that I think the Pope is the Antichrist.
Which one? This one now or the one before? Or the one before that?
Well, the one now especially. Matter of fact, Alex Jones really recently had a thing on about the Pope being the Antichrist, and I think that there's a good chance that that's the case. I don't know. I mean, I am not being a bit of a student of the law. I don't just come out and say something. I tell you what I think, but again, it's what I think. I'm sorry. I need to rephrase that. I think the Pope is the false prophet. Who the Antichrist is, I don't know. But I can tell you that if you read in the I think it's 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John, it talks about the definition of what an Antichrist is, and Obama fits that perfectly. But whether he is or not, I mean, he is an Antichrist. There's a lot of people that are Antichrists according to that definition. And so, whether he is the Antichrist or not, who knows? But I think the Pope is definitely the false prophet. Now, how all of this is going to play out, what stage we're at, who knows? I think that Planet X and Nibiru is going to have something to do with it. I think, you got some great YouTube videos about Planet X and Nibiru. I mean, I watched those. That's where I started. I've watched a lot of those, and that's great stuff. I think that's going to have some effect on it. How it's all going to play out, who knows? We're all pawns in a big game of chess. We get to watch and see what happens, but we don't know we know how it's going to end, but how it's going to play out and everything, who knows?
Right. And the Planet X thing is certainly interesting. When I first started doing podcasts on that phenomenon, I was more so thinking it was just a wag the dog scenario, and I still try and be as neutral as possible on the subject, but with all of the trolling on the videos, it seemed like that really made me think there was something more to it. Even with the best pictures that I've seen, and I just barely released another one today, and these pictures are the best ones that I've seen yet. Also some good video footage, and I'm still would be more to believe that Planet X exists based upon the trolls out there and what they say. And you can tell when they're professionals because of the way that they write and the way they go after people, and they're really good, not just your typical keyboard warrior that's sitting in grandma's basement, going, you know what I mean? So, but I certainly appreciate what you bring to the table, because this is the kind of conspiracy that isn't a conspiracy, and a lot of people don't even have an idea. They don't have any idea what it is. And even myself, I've been researching the unknown now for most of my life. I'm 38, and I would say, geez, 30 of those 38 years, I've been looking for stuff that isn't typical. And this is one of the topics that I know very little about, because it does seem to be kind of hidden to most people.
Yeah, I have been following this stuff. I mean, I have always been interested in all of this stuff. Quite frankly, I mean, any true seeker of the truth. And that's one reason I got to say that I do this stuff, okay? Because I cannot control what you do, or what the guy down the street does, or, what the masses out there do. I cannot control them. And in any free country, I don't expect to be able to control them. And the only thing I can control is me. And I can refuse to participate. And so I intend to do that. And I intend to, it's my attitude is that go ahead, send your hired thugs over here, take me out back, blow my brains out, and until you do, I am going to be the biggest pain in your butt that you can possibly imagine. And that's essentially what I try and do.
Do you get like threats? Do you ever notice people following you around? Any little hints, like things left at your doorstep, or your phone rings, you pick it up, nobody's there, stuff like that?
No, I am very private. I regularly change my phone number. I don't publish my phone number. People want to call me. I tell them, that I don't do phone calls. I provide all my information for free. If they want me to babysit them, my attitude is that we all got ourselves into this because of our own ignorance. And so I can provide you with all sorts of free information that will help you get yourself out of it. But at the end of the day, you have to be the one to do it. And if you want me to babysit you, well, then I need a bunch of money, okay? Because I'm not in the babysitting business. And I'll provide the free information. But otherwise, so I don't give out my phone number. The only people that have my phone number are my friends, and it's private. I do not allow, on my phone, the location stuff. It's all turned off. I'm very private. I don't give that kind of stuff out, and that's all there is to it. If people want that information, some stranger wants it, they're going to pay for it. Believe me.
Do you know anything about living trusts?
Well, I know about trusts. I wouldn't do a living trust. I think that's a waste of time. I got a YouTube video about asset protection, though, and you can certainly do I'm trying to think of the terminology, but it's a trust. It's you can. And a lot of people do those. Matter of fact, that's one of the ways that I operate. I do aerospace engineering consulting. I helped design the hydraulic system on the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. And since I left U.S. Airways in 2006, that's how I work. If I get a contract, it's through a trust and a limited liability company. And because I don't work. I've been fired from several jobs for not producing a Social Security number. Right now, I filed a lawsuit against FedEx, and they know it's still coming. It got dismissed because they removed it. What happened is I filed it in the state court, and they removed it in the federal court, and I called the judge a judicial whore. I told him I have nothing but contempt for your so-called court. Everything he does is brutum fulmen, which is an empty noise. And and I just dumped on him, and I kind of felt guilty afterwards because he came back and he was real nice. Eh? But ultimately he dismissed the case, and FedEx knows that I have a valid case, and FedEx knows that it's coming. And but right now, that's what the current case is in the Supreme Court, is over filing fees, because the filing fees are actually, if you understand about the courts, the up until about 1905, it used to be called the District Court of the United States. Okay, but then in an appropriations bill, okay, for Puerto Rico, when Puerto Rico's first appropriations bill, when after the Spanish-American War. They put in there about, they started calling it United States District Court. And so, and then after that, they started talking about filing fees, and really, so what I'm saying is that the federal courts, they wear two hats. They wear actually a whole bunch of hats. And they can be the lawful de jure courts that are found in Article 3 in the Constitution, or they can be a court that's a D.C. court, in D.C. and the territories, and there are no Article 3 courts in District of Columbia and the territories. But when they are a matter of fact, in the Judicial Code of 1911, it even says in there, it says that the federal courts are admiralty or equity, and that is it. But so the Article 1 is an admiralty court, and so when you're in there, then it's a dictatorship. And I tell them in no uncertain terms that I'm not interested in your military dictatorship, and you can put it up your rectal orifice, and I use that terminology too. And so they don't like that too much, and they want to when they're operating as an admiralty court, they get a royalty. Okay, the judge gets a royalty off it because it's a contract issue, and the judge gets a commission. So what they do is, all these courts are banks, and they when you pay a $400 filing fee, they leverage that by 30 times. So now a $400 filing fee turns into $12,000 to the balance sheet of the court, and the judge is getting a commission off of that. And most judges, there's Harvard Law Review articles that talk about how most judges retire millionaires because of all the admiralty cases they see. And so, they're not interested in justice. They're nothing but a bunch of thieves. That's why I just dump on them. I tell them I have nothing but contempt for your so-called court. And they don't like that. But that's why I'm in the Supreme Court, because those filing fees are really only applicable to lawyers and naturalization proceedings in the District of Columbia and the territories only. And it has nothing to do with Texas.
Okay. Now, also, when you kind of go deal with these institutions like the Supreme Court and sending this information back to government organizations, do you have to send them back like priority? Do you have to do it a certain way to where you're covered as well?
Well, once in any court case, once you do the initial filing, you have to effect service. And so then usually, like with the federal rules, you have to get a third-party process server to do it, or even state rules. Now, most of my documents is, again, we're under martial law rule and have been since the Civil War, certainly since the 30s. There's congressional record that talks about it. Anyway, so under martial law rule, everything is based on presumption, okay? They presume a certain set of facts, like you're one of our slaves, and then the burden's on you to prove that you're not. And so what I do is I serve them with, and this is the stuff that's in the U.S. Marshals, they're using it as an excuse to call me armed and dangerous, because I tell them that it's designed to take away their presumptions and put them in a position that they have to honor their oath. And but they don't want to be honoring their oath. They want to be able to presume you're one of the slaves so they can assault you and get away with it. The bottom line is that when I serve my notice and demands, they're by registered mail, which is effectively the same thing as effecting service. But in a lawsuit, once you effect service on them and they appear in the case, then you can just use first-class mail. That's in a lawsuit.
Now, what do you think about the New World Order and a one-world government?
Well, again, That's all corporate. It really doesn't affect we the people. None of that affects we the people. If we can establish ourselves as we the people, it would be completely peaceful. They would just go away and leave us alone and deal with their corporate entities. But most of the people are so clueless, and people just cave in when they walk all over them. Like, in other words, what's your social security number? Oh, here it is. And nobody objects. That's the reason I've been fired from so many jobs for not producing one, because nobody refuses. And, I mean, it just goes on and on. People just cave right in. And that's the problem. But, and they're gonna, there's gonna be some consequences for that. And I think that's the book of Revelations talks about that.
And that's why I asked, because I spoke with Mike Norris the other day, and he put together a film with Glenn Wheaton called Amerigeddon, where they basically show how the U.S. and people inside of it could get rounded up by UN troops and put in concentration camps, FEMA camps, etc., the separation of families, the loss of all constitutional rights and freedoms. And if something like that takes place, I'm wondering how effective, because obviously they're going to be going after you with tanks and everything else, and it's all going to be in cahoots with this high technology. Have you guys ever thought about ways to be able to make sure that people within our own military and government can offset a foreign government, like a coup type situation?
You have to understand that the Department of Homeland Security is a subsidiary of the Secret Service, and the Secret Service is a subsidiary of the Treasury Department, and the Treasury Department is owned and operated by the International Monetary Fund. So the UN is here. Matter of fact, I read an article here a couple days ago saying that that Homeland Security had U.S. Coast Guard vessels off the coast of Ecuador, and they were capturing ships off the coast of Ecuador. And if they didn't deem them seaworthy, they would take all the people off the ship and sink the ship, and then take the people back to Ecuador. I mean, talk about New World Order garbage. I mean, that's exactly what that is, and they're using that because they're worried about these people winding up here. Well, they can stop them at the border. They have every right to stop them at the border, but they don't want to do that. We can't do that. And then they harass people that are Americans like me. I get assaulted every time I go across the border. Don't get me going.
I mean, you actually go across the border?
Oh yeah, I used to. I don't anymore because I get assaulted.
How do they assault you? What do you mean?
Well, an unlawful arrest is an assault. If there's no probable cause or no lawful warrant, then it's an unlawful arrest. And that's exactly what happens every time. I was assaulted by the border pigs in Texas. It was the Border Patrol, where they have on I-10. That's this side of El Paso. They're about 100 miles near Sierra Blanca. There's that Border Patrol station. Well, they assaulted me. They went and picked me up and took me into their office. I refused to go. They had their guns out and made me wait for 30 minutes while they found out that there was nothing they could do. And so they assaulted me. That's assault. That's kidnapping. That's false imprisonment.
Is this because you wouldn't show them a form of ID or something?
Because it was probably because the U.S. Marshals pig had me in their database, and I was considered armed and dangerous or something.
Okay. Huh. It certainly seems like if you take this stance, it makes your life a much more difficult. I mean, it's certainly a lot more difficult to do things. And for people like you that believe in what you do and stand up for your rights, I certainly appreciate that. And, that's what needs to happen if somebody wants to make a change. They need to be that change that they want to see. So whatever somebody's beliefs is, I mean, that's up to them to make that decision. And that's one of the things I like about the Leak Project is we have an opportunity to speak to people from around the world with different mindsets and opportunities. And, certainly I don't have the answers, and that's why we have an opportunity to speak to people. So, Glenn, you've got some great knowledge and a wonderful YouTube channel. I would recommend that our listeners go to the Sovereign Living on YouTube if you want to watch some of these videos and learn more about this. Also, do you have a website, Glenn?
www.sovereigntyinternational.fyi. I've also got a blog. It's sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. And my attitude is that you have to stand up and before God. When it comes to Judgment Day, are we going to be blameless before God? And if we don't stand up and do what we can to put a stop to this, then we're going to be held accountable.
And if there was maybe one or two other gems you could share with us before we close out tonight, something that maybe I'm not thinking about that I should ask, or some information that you feel is important for people to know about, that'd be awesome.
Well, I sent you that letter. That might be, let's see if I can open that letter up, because I think that speaks volumes by itself. Let me find that letter. It's the letter from Arizona Senator Wayne Stumpf, and it's oh, here we go. Okay, it came up. Okay, and it's dated December 10th, 1985. State Senator Wayne Stumpf, directed to Ralph Milstead, the Director of the Department of Public Safety in Phoenix, and this is a certified copy and apostilled. And it says, quote, it's come to my attention that numerous individuals in our state have rescinded all of their contracts with the United States federal government, the state of Arizona, and each of its political subdivisions, establishing themselves as freemen under the organic national constitution of the Republic of the United States of America. Consequently, they may be driving without auto registration, driver's license, or any other evidence of contract. Because many law enforcement personnel may be unaware of the contractual nature of auto registration and driver's licenses, it is conceivable that this situation may lead to confrontation between these individuals and law enforcement personnel. I urge you to inform yourself and your personnel about this matter as soon as possible. If you would like to be briefed by someone knowledgeable on this subject, please contact me. In the meantime, inasmuch as this procedure is entirely appropriate when properly carried out, I would like to be personally notified of every such instance of confrontation in order to make the persons involved and the public officials involved may be apprised of the correct procedure and the appropriateness of their actions on the part of each concerned. And then he gives his office phone number, and he says, I'm requesting to be notified of the names and incidences along with addresses and phone numbers of participants of any such confrontations arising from the exercise of a person's freeman status in order to evaluate the outcome of properly rescinded contracts. So I think that speaks volumes, and we all have to do what we have to do. I hope that it doesn't come to bloodshed, but I'm afraid it probably will. But again, I'm moving ahead based on the fact that my public servants are going to honor their oaths, and the people where the bloodshed comes is usually because of ignorance, and anytime you got a bunch of people with guns, there's always going to be some loose cannon out there, and that's a problem. What can you do? Really, what we need is our government to go back within the bounds of the Constitution where it should be.
Man, if that happened, it certainly would be different. I mean, because right now it seems like we live in an episode of The Outer Limits meets Hellraiser meets Tron. You know what I mean? It's very interesting. So I certainly appreciate you spending so much time with us, Glenn, and giving us all this information. I mean, just this hour has probably will be equivalent to like 4 hours of talking somewhere else. I mean, you put it all together so eloquently, and for people to understand this kind of stuff, I'll bet you there's going to be a lot of those out there that will probably listen to this podcast 3 or 4 times just because of all the information in it. So check out Sovereign Living on YouTube, folks. Appreciate everything that you guys do out there that listen to these broadcasts as well. Make sure to be the change you want to see. Check out our website, leakproject.com. We've got almost 200 full featured podcasts for free. If you want to have access to them first, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. This is Rex Bear. Good night.